Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. You probably heard the automated voice saying that this is being recorded. It will only record the speaker and the slides, so don't worry about your face being shown. The only purpose of this recording is that we will be posting it on the TNOTA website for later viewing for anyone who could not attend. We had about 25 people register, and so it looks like some people still may be joining or may want to check it out later, and that is completely fine. I understand that tomorrow is a holiday for a lot of people and everybody's busy. So wanted to offer the option of viewing it in recorded form for anyone who is interested at a later date. My name is Stephanie Lancaster. I'm the president of TNOTA and am happy to welcome you to this session, which is going to be one about developing a proposal for the TNOTA conference. So, let's talk about what we're going to cover tonight. I hope that by the end of this session, you are able to talk about the essential elements of a well-structured conference proposal. And I'll add that that will be one that can carry over into other conferences or maybe even other professionally formatted presentations. But certainly for the TNOTA conference, we will talk about those elements, requirements, components, and then determine strategies for developing a compelling title and abstract and really all of the components. And then lastly, identify ways that a conference proposal can be written to align with the theme of the conference. I'm going to tell you some kind of insider information that you may or may not know that will help you get a proposal recognized by the reviewing committee, conference committee, whoever is doing that reviewing for this and other professional presentations. I do want to call your attention to the handout that I created as a Google Doc. I standardly do this when I make presentations so that people who access the presentation in the slide deck can immediately get to that handout, and you should be able to download it, type on it, print it out, save it, whatever you want to do. But to get to that, I put the link in the chat, or you can see it here on the slide. So if you'd like to access that, it is https://tinyurl.com/developing 2025. So that will get you to a Google Doc that's essentially the outline sort of overview that I use to develop this presentation. I will set aside a time for questions at the end. You are also welcome to type that into the chat if you would like as we go. Well, let's get started. What are the benefits to presenting at a conference? I mean, why do people want to do that? Because in general, we don't really get paid for that. Many conferences, but not all, will offer some sort of a discount to presenters so that they can attend the conference for a lesser rate. But really, what are the real tangible, besides financially motivating benefits? So the first one that I will talk about is professional growth. And I'm going to set up a parallel here. That's how I started thinking about presenting early in my OT career. I also am a runner and I like to sign up for events, races or, whatever. And sometimes I know when I register, I'm not prepared to complete the distance or the race, but I register, I sign up anyway because it pressures me into, or we could say motivates me into doing the work to get there by that deadline. So early in my career, that probably was the primary reason that I wanted to present at conferences. I realized that if there was a topic that I knew some about, or maybe even a good bit about, if I did a little legwork and created a proposal and got it accepted at a CE event or a conference, that was, a month away, then that gave me a deadline of when I had to do more learning and put my thoughts together coherently and create a slide deck or a poster or what have you. So it gives you that sort of pressure that you can use in a positive sense. It helps you to deepen your expertise through research or participation or discussion with others. And maybe these are collaborators who are going to be your co-presenters, or maybe just others that you network with to talk about the proposal that you are developing or the presentation that you're planning to do so that you can help develop your insight about that. It obviously enhances your presentation skills, which especially early in one's career can need some dusting off or some sharpening. And it also encourages reflection on things that you have seen, read about, learned, heard about, or just have questions about yourself. It is a way to contribute to the profession. And if any of you are in OT school or thinking back on your days in OT or OTA school, you probably heard your professors harp on this more than you wanted to, but part of our responsibility as OT practitioners is to contribute to the evidence that is available to others who are working in the OT profession. So, a good way to do that is to share your knowledge, share what you have learned through your experience, your clinical reasoning, and your research. It supports the advancement of our profession by helping others to know what the research says. What are some practice ideas? It can inspire others. It can help infuse creativity into the work of others. And that's something that ultimately helps us to fulfill our profession's goals of providing the highest quality care to our patients or clients as we can. It also provides a platform to amplify certain topics, maybe that haven't been in the spotlight a lot, especially in terms of clinical questions that you've come across in your work, or emerging practice areas, or some specialty practice areas, strategies, or ideas that you haven't seen other places, or you just feel like the word needs to be spread on so that others have that exposure and that um, experience to draw on. So, those are some other ideas. It does build on your leadership potential. It helps others to see you as someone who is particularly knowledgeable about the subject or topic on which you are presenting. And then last but not least, it allows you an opportunity to connect with peers, mentors, and leaders in the field. You may run into a job opportunity or a networking or leadership opportunity through presenting that you might not have otherwise. And I don't want to fail to mention, it doesn't look bad on a resume. Certainly, that is something that is recognized by prospective employers, whether you are hoping to one day work at a university or to stay at your current job, but maybe advance into a more of a leadership or administrative role, or get a raise, or just maximize the opportunities that are offered to you as somebody working in the field of OT. So that's kind of the why. I personally, and this is might need to give a little bit of a nerd alert here, but I think it's fun. It invigorates me to present, and I feel like I benefit way more than the work that I put into it. I get more than I give, so to speak, in doing that. So, what are the steps? How do we break down the order of operations in developing an effective conference proposal or presentation? And I put these into steps. The very first one, and one that sometimes is skipped over in this process, I think, is learning about the conference and or the event. You also want to note the requirements in the application, so do that early on. and then draft an outline. And I mentioned when I was talking about the handout that I prepared for this session that was my outline, that was my working draft. I've heard that some people will start by opening a slide deck and starting to put things in slides. And that really, according to teaching literature, is backwards. You really are supposed to start putting your ideas down on paper, whether you're writing it out, typing it out on a Word document or a Google Doc or the back of an envelope or whatever. But put your thoughts together on paper first in an outline or some sort of a list. And that's going to make it so much easier, so much more structured and more efficient to actually develop that proposal. So that would be your middle step, step 3. Then you're going to want to think about what it is that you want participants or attendees, people that come to your session, if your proposal gets accepted, what do you want them to learn, to take away from that session? So at the end of that session, what do you hope they're able to do? And I'm going to talk about a little bit of the pitfalls in that and give you a couple tips on that. And then last but not least, of course, is developing the details. And with that also can come the title. Sometimes people get really caught up in thinking that the title needs to be first because it's the first thing you see when you open your slide deck when you are presenting, but it really isn't usually what you need to put on paper or on a slide first. Get the content, get the learning objectives, and then the content, and then you can come up with a title. And I'll talk more about that and some tips for that, doing that in just a minute. So since the first step of creating a proposal for the TNOTA conference is learning about the organization and the event, that's what I want to do in this next phase of this presentation. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about TNOTA, and this is important for people who are current members or prospective members, or even if you don't think you will ever be a TNOTA member, it's still important as somebody who is going to put together a proposal for you to understand the vision, the mission, sort of the nuts and bolts of the organization. So the vision of TNOTA is to excel as the primary resource, authority, and public voice of the profession of occupational therapy in the state of Tennessee. And the mission of TNOTA is to advance the profession in the state through education, advocacy, communication, and legislative involvement, really to support the provision of high quality OT services and promote the benefits of our profession to consumers, stakeholders, and legislators. Little bit about TNOTA that you might not already know. It is the only organization in the state of Tennessee that represents the interests of all OT and OTA students and OT practitioners across the state, as well as current consumers, clients, patients, and prospective consumers. So it is, as a professional organization, it's dedicated to representing the interests of really those two groups, practitioners and clients, consumers, or prospectives. It is a state affiliate of our National OT Association, AOTA, and we share common goals, but we are separate entities. And it is available to members and other practitioners in the state to serve as the ultimate resource on things like the Practice Act, legislative activity, and requirements for continuing education, and so on, all regarding best practice for OT in the state. There are 6 geographical regions that we have broken the organization down into. And so you can see the map here on the slide going from the west side of the state all the way across to the northeast side and then down to the southeast. And the reason that that is done is there are district leaders who sometimes host local events. So it makes it easier for people who want to attend those events. They don't have to drive as far when those are in-person events. Each of our districts has a goal of hosting 4 events a year, so about one per quarter every calendar year. And that can be a mix of virtual live events, networking events, continuing ed, professional development events, uh, in person, boots on the ground. And then often some of those are recorded, so they are often available asynchronously as well as in a live format. So we try to offer a lot of options for continuing education through our 6 districts. In addition, we have 7 active committees in TNOTA, and you can see those. Those are listed if you're wondering in alphabetical order. They are all as important as the others, and there are opportunities to volunteer and serve on any of these committees or at the district level. And you can see those committees ranging all the way from advocacy all the way around clockwise to the student involvement committee. And so we have lots of things that go on in the organization on a monthly basis. Each of these committees strives also to host 4 continuing education events annually. And all of that is in addition to our annual conference. So what's the value of membership in TNOTA? If you are a current member, what are you getting for the money you invest? Or if you're not a member, what might you get if you pay for membership? Well, first I'll tell you the cost of membership in case you aren't a member or if you are but have forgotten how much you have paid. For a first-year practitioner in the field, so after the first year after graduation, an OT assistant can be a member for $40 for the year, and an OT can be a member for $60 a year for the first year of practice. After that, the cost is $80 per year for an occupational therapist and $60 per year for an OT assistant. Anyone who is retired but wants to maintain membership, that's $40 a year. And for our students, both OT and OTA students, that is $20 a year. So in the grand scheme of things, if you compare this to other state associations, our national association, other professional associations, it is on the lower side and very affordable in the scheme of things. But still, what do you get for that money? One thing you get if you are a TNOTA member is a discount on conference registration. Now, the exact cost of the annual conference varies from year to year, depending on how many continuing ed credits are available in that conference. But in general, the discount that a member gets is at least the cost of the annual membership. So in other words, if you pay the cost of the conference, you essentially get a free membership if you pay the full price, if you did it that way. As you probably know, every OT practitioner in the state is required to take 1 hour of ethics and 1 hour of jurisprudence per licensure cycle, so per 2-year cycle. And that training is free to our members. So that is worth $40. And that is the cost of it for a non-member. And we do offer that 6 times a year virtually. There is also an asynchronous version through our continuing education partner, Aspire OT, that is free to our members. And we offer some E&J in person. And one of those will be an in-person E&J at the conference. So the Friday, September 12th of conference weekend. So if you want to attend in person and you're coming to conference anyway, tack on that extra day. And if you remember, it's free. The other mandatory training, according to our Licensure Act, is the suicide prevention training. And this is a 2-hour training that has to be completed by every occupational therapist every other licensure cycle. So for some reason, when they developed this law a few years back, they did not list OTAs, but it is recommended by our licensure board that OTAs also complete this training once every 4 years. That 2-hour training is also free for TNOTA members. And in fact, The training was specifically designed in relation to suicide prevention in occupational therapy by our mental health committee, and those are the individuals that teach that. And that also will be offered as part of the pre-conference, and it is offered throughout the year. So you can check out the TNOTA website and see when that stuff is offered if you want to sign up for it. As I mentioned earlier, there are many, roughly 50 opportunities for continuing ed credits, and those are free to our members. To non-members, they cost $20 per contact hour. And so you could do the math on that. You really could save a lot of money by being a member if you are going to get your CE credits through our association. And those are automatically recognized by the licensure board. In addition to those things that are more quantitative in figure, when we can put a dollar amount on it. I also want to say that we have a paid lobbyist that looks out for the interests of our profession at the state level. We also work with a legislative representative in our association that connects with the legislative committee members at AOTA. So we're looking out for our profession at the federal level. We have opportunities for communities of practice, professional mentorship program, and that's a structured program open to OT and OTA students and practitioners at this time. And then access to TNOTA leadership and staff via email and phone. One thing that we added about a year ago is capacity to text and get a prompt response during business hours. So if you got just a really quick question, want to know about something, and don't see it on the website, or you just need that advice, you should get a quick turnaround during business hours through text or phone call. And certainly you can always email as well. So lots of benefits, both tangible and more intangible, for TNOTA membership. Let's move on and talk about the conference, because besides the organization that you're hoping to present with, you also need to learn about the event. So what can I tell you about the TNOTA conference? It is held annually in a different location in Tennessee. We rotate around to different areas in the state. This year, the conference is in Jackson. So that's our rural West district, but we consider that the west part of Tennessee. It will be held at the hospital there in Jackson. And we typically have that conference around the middle of September, and that is the case this year. It is September 13th and 14th, with again that pre-conference on Friday, September 12th. Every year, the conference committee comes up with a theme, and we try to link that to what's going on in the field, as well as maybe something local or at the state level that is important in our profession. And so this year's theme is Beyond Limits, Expanding OT's Reach and Impact. And you can see our logo there on the screen. But when you are developing a conference proposal, you want to think about how it interfaces or fits in with that conference theme. That's something that the reviewers who look at the proposals think about. That it is intentionally chosen, though, to be somewhat vague. It's open for some interpretation, and that is by design. So you might think of that in terms of specialty areas of practice, emerging areas of practice, more rural health, or underserved communities, and what that might look like in relation to our profession. So those are some ideas that you might consider when you're thinking about a topic or honing the topic that you're hoping to present on. We typically have between 200 and 250 people at the conference, and I can tell you by the numbers, last year, the conference that was held in Nashville had 18 short sessions, so those are 50 minutes, 6 workshops, so those are an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes, two different poster sessions with 14 posters in each session. We had 219 conference attendees over 2 days. And so that gives you an idea of what the conference looked like last year. And we anticipate it being very similar this year. We're always trying to increase the numbers, but really that is kind of the sweet spot historically, that 200 to 250 people who attend the conference. Some people just come for the Saturday, some people just for the Sunday, some people pre-conference only, but a lot of people come for the whole thing. And it really is a good way to knock out essentially all the CEs that you need for that year by attending the full conference. One thing that I do want to bring to your attention is that we're doing something a little different with the keynote this year. Instead of having one single keynote speaker, we are going to have a panel of keynote speakers talking about their experience in the field, their work, that as it relates to the Beyond Limits theme. And so right now we are accepting nominations for keynote panelists, and you can nominate yourself or someone else or encourage a colleague to nominate themselves if you would like. And those nominations can be submitted at tinyurl.com/TNOTA panel. You also can go to tnota.org, and that information and the button that you click to get to that nomination form is right there, linked from the home page. So that's a really cool opportunity to showcase some of the work that the OT practitioners are doing out in the field, and for us to learn about that as part of a panel presentation as our keynote session. Traditionally, the keynote session is over the lunch hour on the Saturday of conference, and lunch is provided. And then on the Sunday of conference is our annual open board meeting. And so you learn about the finances, advocacy work, all the things going on in the association by attending that. And also lunch is served at that also. Next in the steps to developing a conference proposal is really thinking about what is a proposal. So kind of drilling down to that, it's a pitch. It's a detailed pitch for a presentation, and that might be a poster session, a short course, or a workshop, or somebody some conferences will take proposals for more discussion-based groups or panels. But the proposal outlines your topic, the way you intend to deliver that information, your learning objectives. So in other words, how it benefits participants, looking at highlighting the value of the conference offering that session. What are those essential elements? So first is the topic and the format. And those to me go hand in hand, thinking about what do I want to talk about? What information am I trying to get out there and to share? And then what is the best format for doing that? So would it be more of a lecture based, more discussion based, a poster that I think is very discussion based? What would work best for your preferences and to get the message across that you're hoping to get across? At the TNOTA conference, we offer 3 options for format. First being a poster session, and those, depending on how many submissions we get for posters, will be either a 1-hour or a 2-hour session, and the presenters stand by their poster the whole time and just talk to people that come by and ask questions about their work that is displayed on a poster. A short course that's what most people do, I think, usually, but it is one of the options, and that is a 50-minute session. So it's we do it in hour-long blocks, but there's a 10-minute break in between. So the presenter talks for 50 minutes, including allowing time for questions and answers in that presentation. And then the third is the workshop, and that's more interactive. We set that up as either an hour and a half or an hour and 45-minute session. with time for discussion, sharing of ideas, and questions with attendees. So it's very comprehensive in nature. So think about what would work best with your topic when you are developing that proposal. Next is you will be asked to share a presenter's bio. So that's going to be a very short, really short paragraph, 100 words or less. And what you want to feature in that is why are you qualified to speak on this topic? So you don't have enough words to give your whole life history. It's not an entire resume in a paragraph. It's who are you and why are you qualified to speak on this topic at this event? You do want to list your highest degree and your professional credentials, your OT licensure credentials there. Then we get to the title. So I recommend that you try to be concise, but at the same time descriptive. Sometimes people will try to put in something catchy, and that's okay. You don't have to, though. What I would really recommend for that is to look at the titles in last year's conference and kind of spin off that. And you can get to that if you go to the TNOTA website and click on events, and it'll list this year's conference and then also last year's conference, and check out the titles and even the bios and the descriptions and learning objectives and all that from the last year's sessions as a model and an exemplar that you might use. You do want to write a bio in third person, so don't say, I volunteer with TNOTA and I've been in the field for 10 years. You're going to talk about yourself in third person. So I would say Stephanie works at and has experience in this sort of thing. And you can, that's fine for an OT and OTA student also to say that you are a student at a certain university, and again, talk about why you have the expertise, the background to present on the topic that you are presenting on. And then last, as far as the basic elements of a proposal, is to think about the level. So what is the advancement level of the audience that you're hoping? Will they be mostly introductory, some people that are maybe students or new practitioners, or maybe just practitioners that don't have knowledge about the topic that you're speaking about? Or maybe they have a little knowledge, but not a lot, or maybe it's an advanced topic. And that might even be, it could even be somebody like me that's been in the field for decades, but I don't know a lot about, let's say, aquatic therapy. So if I'm going to attend a session, I would want it to be probably intermediate at most or introductory. If it's advanced, that's for somebody that's already practicing in that area. And you also can choose poster session. And then you're going to choose a topic area. And so there's a list of a lot of options for that. And you can choose more than one, but this helps the conference committee when they are developing the schedule for the conference, because they put things in tracks like pediatrics or orthopedics or neuro or student tract. And so what you mark will help that determination. Now, in the red box on the slide is a tip that I wanted to make sure to remember to share. What I do every time I develop a conference proposal is I go to the submission site, the application or the form, and I copy and paste it. And then I paste it into my own, I copy it from their form, and then I paste it into my own Word document. And that way, I'm going to type right in that Word document and fill in. I'll put ideas, I'll put all kind of references, some that I might use and talk about in my presentation, but some that I might not. I can completely edit it as I go. It's a work in progress. And I can put ideas for titles, but I'm not submitting it from there exactly until I get it really fine-tuned. So that is a way to give yourself an overview of what requirements are there before you even start writing. And then it also is a way to fine tune the information that you put on that form, because before you copy and paste it over this submission form, you're going to run a spell check, a grammar check, um, proofread it so that in Word, so that when you paste it into the document, you don't have something like a spelling or punctuation error that is a red flag for the committee. So that'll help you prepare. It's a little bit of a shortcut or just an insider tip. So part two of the essential elements, the learning objectives. Again, this is what you want anyone who comes to your session to get out of it. TNOTA asks for 3 learning objectives for each session. And the biggest glitch, I think, with this is that people will write objectives that are either for the speaker or presenter or that are not measurable. So I've seen objectives come through and they'll say, during this session, the presenter will share 3 ways that you can learn more about hand therapy. Well, this is really asking for the learning objectives for the attendees or the participants, not the objectives for the presenter. So flip that. And then as far as being measurable, it's just like OT goals. You want to be able to say, did your attendees do it or not? And more importantly, you want them to be able to say, did they meet those learning goals or not? And so you want to really avoid words like no and understand in your learning objectives because you really can't see that, so you can't measure it. Now, you can say, can someone name 3 things? Can they discuss? Can they identify? Can they list? Can they reflect on? All those things that you can behaviorally see, those are much better verbs to use in your learning objectives. These again are the way that people who come to your session are going to determine was it a quality session or not. And the conference committee that vets these proposals definitely looks at that. Next is the course synopsis or the overview or summary of what your course is about. They ask that this be 150 words or less. And so that is just like a good solid paragraph. You can write it in 2 paragraphs, but just to think of what the length of it in your head about a solid paragraph, let it describe what the session is about. You don't have to restate the learning objectives because they'll see that too if your proposal gets accepted, both the learning objectives and your synopsis will be in the conference program. So keep that in mind as you're writing it. And again, I really would encourage you to look at examples from last year to see if you're on track when you're developing yours. Getting towards the end of your proposal, you are asked to submit 3 references. Now, these need to be peer-reviewed journal or textbook references, not something from, the New York Times or Facebook. Think about, the soapbox that professors get on in OT school. What is a good source and not such a good source? It does need to be published within the last 10 years, preferably the last 5 years, but they'll accept it within the last 10 years. Now, in some cases, you might want to include for one of those references something that's called a seminal source. And so that really is defined as something that is considered like the original source. It can be older than 10 years, but it might be like what's the guru, the original thinker on something, someone who started aquatic therapy or animal assisted therapy, for example. It can be older than 10 years if you have that seminal source. So those are your references. And then at the very end of the proposal application, you'll be asked 3 or maybe 4 questions, and you just want to make sure to answer those. Do not leave those blank. They're going to ask you, do you consent to having your session recorded if the conference committee is going to record? It's okay if you put no. That won't impact your getting chosen or not, but It'll make things smoother for everybody if you put your preference on the application rather than later saying like, I said I didn't, but I do, or vice versa. It will ask you, would your presentation be appropriate for a student tract? Yes or no. Or I think it also says if you're unsure, you can mark that. And then if you need any accommodations, whether those are religious accommodations, like you cannot present on a Saturday, or if you need disability related accommodations, you can mark that on that form so the conference is prepared to support you as should be done. Those answers will not affect whether or not your proposal gets chosen or not. It just helps the committee to prepare. All right, the fine print. So now we're getting to when you actually submit. You want to read the instructions for submission and the policies governing accepted proposals before submission. So that stuff is all right there in the application. Sometimes people will say, well, I didn't know that that presenters don't get to go for free, or I didn't know that I have to register to present, or, different conferences have different rules, and you want to read those so you are not surprised by any of that information. And that's all right there. It, then let's talk about the review process, because just like when you're in school, it's important to know what are the graders, what are the people giving feedback and looking for whether this is a good match or not. What are they looking for? Here is the list. They are looking for, is the topic relevant to what's going on in the field and to the conference theme? Is it original? If 5 other people submit the same topic, the committee's going to have to make some hard choices. Last year, there were 2 groups. It was actually a group of 3 and then one individual that submitted a very similar proposal. And I know this because I was one of the 3 people in the group that submitted. And what the conference committee actually did was to email those 4 individuals and tell them what was going on and say, your proposals were very similar. We want to give everybody an opportunity. Would you be willing to work together as a group of 4 to present? And we were, and that's what we did. So that could be done if, more than one person submits and it's pretty much the same. So looking for originality. What are the presenter's qualifications? What is how does the synopsis or summary look? Is it relevant to what's going on in our field? And then the quality of those learning objectives and the references. So if you go through those earlier steps and remember those tips and tricks and look at the things on that handout, you should have all of that squared away. What are some common pitfalls? The biggest thing I can tell you is that attention to detail is key. Don't leave anything blank on the application, because that can kind of be a red flag to the committee. You want to have a title that actually talks about what you're going to talk about. It doesn't need to be too general, like all about all specialty areas of practice. That's too general. You're just going to have, an hour or hour and a half to talk about that. You really can't cover that adequately in that amount of time. So narrow that down if it's too general. Your learning objectives, again, need to be measurable and clear. Use action verbs, not words like know or understand that we cannot observe and someone really can't prove whether or not that's been done. You want to highlight, I know in OT we generally don't like to brag, but this is the time when you are writing your bio that you want to toot your own horn. Tell the committee why you are qualified. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to have some expertise. So I hope you see that distinction. You have to have done some work, whether it's clinical experience and or research, to develop your experience or expertise on that particular topic. Poor grammar, formatting, incomplete submission, don't do it. Do that spell check, grammar check in your Word document and help yourself out that way. You also may want to get a colleague or someone else who's kind of the English nerd friend that you have to proofread yours and give you feedback. And then last but all very important is you want to align what you are putting on paper in your proposal with the conference theme. Again, the themes for these conferences are chosen with some leeway, some gray area intentionally, but make sure that you could talk about in your proposal how what you want to talk about aligns with that theme. So attention to detail. I like to, other than copying and pasting what is in the application on a Word document, the second tip that I will give you, and I have an example for you, is to create a checklist. And so this is just for my own use, and you could do one just for your own use to make sure I'm submitting on time. I'm submitting all of the components that are required, and I've double checked, spell check, grammar check, make sure everything is complete. All boxes are checked. And if you get to before you submit, or even after you submit, if you realize you have a question or you wish you could have added something to it, email the conference committee. It's a very easy email, conferencecommittee@tnota.org, and you'll get a response for that. They want to work with potential presenters, and so it's a very friendly process, I think, in general. Another piece of insider information that's really important that I'm going to tell you, and you'll be ahead of most people in knowing this, is that the deadline for submission of a proposal right now is listed as 11:59 Central Time on May 9th, but that will be extended by 2 weeks. So the actual final deadline will be midnight on May 23rd. So if you feel like you need extra time, if you're in a really busy season, I know there's a lot of graduations, weddings, if anybody is in academia and they're given final exams, everybody's got a lot going on, right? So the committee wanted to give that extra time. So right now, if you look on the website, if you look on TNOTA socials, you'll see May 9th, but no, from me to you, that is going to be extended by 2 weeks. So maybe that'll help you relax into it a little bit. And you can tell people that it's not, CIA top secret or anything. That is going to be publicized closer to the first deadline, that the actual final deadline will be May 23rd. So keep that in mind. So I took a screenshot of what my proposal checklist looks like. You can make your own. You could use this one if you want. Again, I love tiny URLs because you don't have to type out that really long web address. But if you go to tinyurl.com/TNOTA25 list, or click on the hyperlink that's on that handout that I provided for you, that'll take you to this checklist, and you can use it or not. You can make your own, whatever you want. This is just something that I do to make sure I have dotted my I's and crossed my T's. So here is my list of references. The top three are what I really used, as well as my years of experience of both serving on conference committees and submitting a lot of proposals over the years, some of which were not accepted. And so I learned from that, and hope to share that with you so that your presentation, your proposal is accepted. The top three are the main references I used for this information. And I did also want to share some other resources for further learning. So there, AOTA, if you want to do a poster presentation, AOTA has a really helpful template that you can use and access. There's also an article that they wrote a year or two ago and published on their student information on their website that's called To Present or Not to Present. And it really does speak to a lot of the same reasons that I talked about. What are the benefits or motivators for presenting? Then AOTA also has some student presentation tips that I think are also helpful to practitioners, especially if you haven't presented at a conference very often or ever. There is a whole handbook about poster presentations that you can access. And then I came across a dissertation written about the development of an effective presentation in OT. So I linked that on your handout. And then last but not least, this is not specific to OT, but if you are somebody who is teaching, wants to present at CE events and or at conferences, I highly recommend checking out the work of Nancy Duarte. She wrote a book called Slideology, and that is where I learned a lot of what I know about slide deck development and developing presentations in an evidence-based way. What does the research tell us is the best way to do that so that it's most efficient for the presenter and effective in getting your point across to the participants? So she has a TED Talk. If you're more of a, video watching kind of person, I think it's 18 minutes long. She has that book, and then there's some other written information. If you Google Nancy Duarte, Duarte, you'll get some good insight there. Um, and one more insider information, and I just came from another meeting in which this was discussed. If you are coming to conference, which I hope you are, the Saturday night of conference is going to be a social event that is going to be to benefit the Tennessee OT Foundation, which is a nonprofit that provides scholarships to students. And to raise money for those scholarships, they're going to have a trivia contest at the hotel, bar, and restaurant at the conference hotel. So more information is going to come out in early June about that. But it is going to be really fun. There's going to be small teams, so you could do it with your buddies or meet new people and play trivia. And one of the categories is going to be OT history. So that'll be interesting to see how much people remember about that. It might be something that gives students a little bit of a leg up or new grads over more experienced practitioners who may not remember all that information. But all of that, you can bring anybody you want, is going to be that Saturday night. So make plans to attend if you are going to be in the area. And with that, we've got about 8 minutes for questions. Anybody want to talk about anything, ask anything, or share? Don't be shy. All right.
Stephanie, sorry.
No, go ahead, Taylor.
I wanted to clarify the references. So we, it's not references that like we have been part of. It's references related to either the poster content that we're presenting or the short course workshop that we're presenting on.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
You do not need to have ever authored a peer-reviewed journal article to present. And in fact, most people haven't who are submitting proposals. Just like the slide that I just showed with the references I used, it's where you got your information for what you're putting in your proposal or your presentation. If you just got it from things you know from school or from your work, that's okay, but you do want to search, and you can just use Google Scholar or look in on the AOTA website or just Google it. What are some journal articles that support the ideas that you are talking about so that we are evidence-based? So again, here's the example of that kind of parallels it. This is where I got some information, some of the information I shared, and then I added other resources that people might want to look at. But this would be like the 3 APA formatted articles here that I use for this presentation, and that's similar to what you would do. If you get stuck on that, please do not let that be your barrier. But I definitely want to say if you want help with this, one of my favorite things, again, nerd alert, but one of my favorite things to do is to help people develop their potential as a presenter. And I would love to work with you if you want help with that. So I do see some other questions in the chat. Chad is asking, how do you get your CE certificate? That will be emailed to you. Maybe not tomorrow since that's a federal holiday, but early, next week. It will be emailed to you from the TNOTA administrator. One of our staff members, I think, actually already has those ready to go out. So that should be early next week. Someone else is asking, what if we would like to have something discussed but don't want to present? Like if you want to learn more about something, drop me a line, please. I love to talk about that stuff. So my easiest email for me is president@tnota.org. And sometimes you might tell me something and I know somebody who can present on that and I'll kind of nudge them to present. So that might be one thing. Um, there will be a suicide prevention training the Friday before conference. And then there will be another one in the Jackson area as part of something that district does in, I think, November. And then we also have those virtually every other month. So check out the tnota.org website, and anything that is solidly planned is listed on that calendar. Let's see. The Yes, the suicide prevention training requirement is only in the Practice Act for occupational therapists. Again, the licensure board says they would like for OTAs to attend, but you do not have that if you're an OTA as part of your licensure requirements right now. Ellen, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I had a question. I am challenged thinking about the goals. When I present at our employee conference, usually my first learning objective is, and now I'm like, oh, whoops, for just some people to understand the mechanism of, trauma in the brain, whatever, something
Yeah.
like that. And I
Yep.
will usually have one that's like most of my audiences are counselors. And so they will walk out with 3 sensory activities that they could do in their session. So that is
Yep.
but when I think of three, if there is an education component, I'm challenged thinking about how to make it measurable that the participants demonstrated without there being like a learning check. So maybe that's it. Maybe there is a learning check integrated into it. I just can't
Yeah,
think
there
of.
there could be, or you just pretend there is one in your head. So what
Okay.
I usually use is verbs like name, list, identify, discuss.
Right.
And I'm not actually going to make people do that because it's not like a OT school course. I'm not giving a
Right.
test. But if
Right.
I did, I hope that participants could do that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
please do not. The two things I think people get hung up on, and maybe it might even scare some people away from submitting,
Uh-huh.
is the learning objectives, just like you're saying, and the
Uh-huh.
references. And if you submit and that stuff is not exactly,
Mhm.
the conference committee will just email you and say, like, hey, would you be willing to change this to this verb? They're
Okay.
very
Okay.
friendly. They're not trying to turn
Right.
people away. You
Right.
also
Yeah.
can always reach out to me and I'll give you feedback or suggestions if you want.
Okay. So it's not necessarily that there has to be some evidenced measurement of every participant, you
Right.
know,
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you asked.
showed their understanding of
Yes.
this educational component. Okay.
Yes. You can
Okay.
just
So it's just verbiage,
pretend like
maybe.
just pretend
Right.
like there is. If there
Okay.
were, would people you think people would be able
Got
to
it.
name, identify, list, discuss? So
Got it. Got it. Okay.
right. So I
Thank
just
you.
put my direct email address in the chat. And but I truly do mean that. I'm not just saying that to be nice. I like it to talk about ideas for proposals or helping you hone those, especially if you haven't done it a lot. You can do it. I want you to submit if you even think you might want to. It's fun, it's exhilarating, it's a way to showcase your knowledge, the things that you have learned. And even if you are an early career OT, I promise you, you have energy and ideas that other people will benefit from. Anything else, y'all? All right. Well, don't be a stranger. Reach out if you have any questions, either conference committee at tnota.org or me at TNOTA, president at TNOTA.org. org, and we'll support you. We want to see some new presenters every year and would love to have you all submit. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you at conference.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks for being here, y'all. Good night.